Hi, I'm Daniel Lucas, and welcome to Book 101 Review. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years, and today I have my special guest. He is the author of the book Out of Work, Not Out of Worth, no other than Dr. David Petrove. Welcome to Book 101, Dr. David, and can you please introduce more about yourself?
Yes, I'm Dr. David Petrove, and I currently reside in Bend, Oregon. And prior to that, I've lived all over the country. And I was an educator for 34 years before I decided to shift into the work that I do today, which is career coaching and counseling. And I refer to it as work, but it's really not work, Daniel. Because I love what I do, and I look forward to every day. So I've been doing this type of work overall for about 25 years now. And as I said, I enjoy every day of it.
Dr. David, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge to the world, especially your books. So, what does the title Out of Work, Not Out of Worth mean to you?
So back in 2013, I was doing a workshop for a group of people in California. And the title of the workshop was Getting to Up from Down, Dealing with Depression During Your Job Search. And as I spoke with the participants, they were telling me about their overall experience being out of work. And it went much beyond the idea of being depressed. So, as I spoke to them during this workshop, I gathered information about what their concerns were, what they were dealing with when they were unemployed, Daniel. And what I found was there tended to be five main themes that I gathered in talking with them. And we'll talk about that in a bit. But I thought, what do I do with this information? I could continue to do workshops, but that would only touch, maybe 100 or so lives. If I was to write a book and publish it, it would reach so many more people who are dealing with these issues.
So,
So,
how
go ahead.
how does the book address the emotional impact of losing a job?
So there were five themes, psychological areas that were identified as I spoke to these people. And then I did subsequent workshops and found the same themes running through them, the same psychological areas that they were dealing with. So they are self confidence, perseverance, acceptance, resilience, and commitment. And so when I was putting the book together, my participants in these workshops actually created the subsections to the chapters. And I would say, okay, if we're going to look at self confidence, what are some main areas that you would be dealing with your self confidence? Things like identifying your strengths and weaknesses. And with each of those, Daniel, I created an exercise for people to take that to the next level so that they had more content to deal with in their job search. And so, again, with each of them, it led down the path to the book that was eventually printed. Now, the original title was Life Between Jobs, Out of Work, Not Out of Worth. And that was the first printing. But a book group that I belonged to said it doesn't really tell what the book is about. So then we recrafted it. So the second part of the book, the tagline, became the main title of the book. And then through a polling process, we came up with navigating the emotional side of job loss. And oftentimes, when you look at what happens when people are unemployed, they say, okay, here's what you do to get back into the job market. You write the perfect resume, you do your networking, you practice your interviewing. Well, those are all wonderful skills to have. But what are people going through emotionally while they do this? especially, let's say, if they apply for a position, they think that they're well qualified for it, and then they get the rejection letter. Where does that place them with their self-confidence? And it's not by accident that self-confidence was the first chapter in the book, because self-confidence tends to take the biggest hit when people are unemployed. They begin to question their skills, they begin to, their value is questioned, all of that. And so it's probably the longest chapter in the book also.
The longest chapter. So, what does the book suggest about separating one's self worth from their employment status?
Well, I think that unfortunately, we live in a country where much of how we identify ourselves is through the work that we do. I don't know about you, Daniel, but I cannot tell you how many social events I've been to where one of the first questions that people ask is, what do you do for a living? Okay. And in many other countries that I've visited, that is not something that you would begin a conversation with. That's considered in poor taste to do that. But here, because it is so critical in terms of who we are, you're talking about how do we separate out what we do from who we are. And it's very simple. What we do is not who we are. It's an aspect of who we are, just like so many other areas of our lives are simply aspects of who we are. Being in a relationship is just an aspect of who we are. Being a parent is an aspect of who we are. Being a friend. So we really need to take a good hard look at the role that work plays in our life and begin to demystify its role in terms of when I'm unemployed, what does that mean in terms of my value in life? And when I'm at that social event and someone asks me, well, what do you do? It's very embarrassing, very awkward for people to say, well, I'm currently out of work. I'm currently unemployed, because somehow there's a judgment that accompanies that, as you must have done something to be in that situation. Where, as you know, many times in today's day and age, it has nothing to do with what we've done. It's just the way things are in the workplace. We have downsizing, we have offshoring, so many different ways that people can no longer be employed in the position they were in.
How can individuals refrain unemployment as opportunity rather than a setback?
Well, you can simply call it for what it is. Well, I'm currently not working. That doesn't mean I'm not looking for a position. But if you're in a social situation, okay, I think one of the things to do is, first of all, keep it social. Okay. Don't make it about, look, I'm looking for a job. Can you help me find something? That puts people in a very awkward position. And they really want to run the other way because they may not know immediately how they can be of help. What you want to do is just begin to form relationships with people when you're in those kinds of situations so that they get to know you as a person. And oftentimes I found that in doing so, we've come around to, and what type of work have you been doing? And I would tell them, and I'm in the process, let's say, of making a shift in my career. And I love it when people say they're making a career change. You never make a career change, okay? You only have one career, and it's the sum total of all the work you've ever done. So the first day that you were paid in a position, that was the start of your career. Your career ended the last day that you were ever paid for that position. So you're simply on a path.
Very well said, Mr. David. Very well said. I like the way you say it. So, what strategies does the book offer for maintaining mental health during unemployment?
Well, I think one of the first things I brought up, Daniel, was first of all, being able to identify your strengths. Okay, what is it that I actually bring to the workplace? What are the skill sets that I have? How does my personality play into the type of work that I do? Am I a person who is very social, very extroverted, or am I more of an introvert where For me, sitting behind a computer is a place where I prefer to be. Whereas an extrovert would say, no, put me in front of a group of people because that's where I get my energy. So understanding what that is, and then you basically you take that into the interview, all of that information about yourself. And those are that's just one area that people would look at. So it's strengths, it's skills, it's so many different aspects of who you are. Building your self-confidence in terms of saying, this is what I'm worth, knowing what your worth is. What have your accomplishments been in the work that you've done? That's a big area that I do workshops in. So, what are your accomplishments and how do you state those to people? Because people hire success, right?
Yes.
So, they want to hire people who have a track record of doing well. And that's a great way to build your self confidence in terms of being able to track what those successes have been and being able to share those in a way that talks about, here was the situation I was dealing with. Here was the solution I applied. And as a result of that, here's what happened. And if I made that difference for this company, I absolutely believe that I can make that difference from yours. And it's also for your company. And it's also doing your research. That's a big part of it, is what are these companies' needs? And how can you address the needs of this company so that you can hit the ground running? And as you're going through that interview, saying, I've done some research on your company and I've talked to other people who have worked for your company or currently are working for it. And I find that one of the things that you might need some support in is, and then you name it, and then how you would go about addressing that based upon your achievements. Now, what I say to people also is you have to be careful, because if you go in and you're giving them answers to their problems, why should they hire you? Okay, so you give them a teaser and you say to them, if you want to know more about how I would solve this problem, you'll need to hire me. What a great way
Definitely.
to, segue into a job offer.
Definitely, I agree with you, Miss Dr. David. So, how can someone stay motivated while searching for a new job?
I think one way to stay motivated, a couple of ways, Daniel. One of them is, and I did this when I was making a shift in the work that I was doing, I volunteered. If you're looking to try something new, look for opportunities to practice the skill sets that are involved. So I was working with a one stop career center, and one of the people who was a counselor there said, would you like to do some volunteer career counseling for people going through the program? And I said, sure, I'd love that. So Tuesday afternoons, I volunteered 2 hours of time, 1 hour, oh, I'm sorry, 1/2 hour segments where people would come in and tell me what it was that they were dealing with. And then I would work with them to come up with strategies and solutions for the next steps that they could take. And the feedback that I received was, you're on the right track if this is the change that you want to make. So that is a big one. When you're volunteering, look for ways to stretch those skill sets, even develop maybe some new ones. Also, volunteering is a great way to network and to stay motivated that way. Not only what can that person do for you, but what can you do for them? Great way to stay motivated. I think also that when you are looking at ways to stay in the game in terms of motivation, what is it that motivates you? Some people are motivated by simply getting feedback, verbal feedback on the job that they're doing. Other people like to get some type of a physical reward, like I'm going to give you 2 tickets to one of the local football games, okay? Or they get a Starbucks card. They love that. That motivates them. Those are what we call extrinsic motivators. Intrinsic is more the motivation that comes from within, just feeling good about who you are and what you have to offer. And that will shine through when you talk to people. And I think, Daniel, if people like being around you, that is going to help you to stay focused on where you're headed with your job. because we work with other people unless you're working in isolation. And there are a few jobs out there where you get to do that. But for those of us who prefer to be in work settings that involve a multitude of people, hey, it helps to have those people skills.
People skill. People skill. So, what role does resilience play in overcoming the challenges of being out of work?
Well, as I was telling you earlier, you're going to get those rejection letters. I've gotten them. All right. I had one job that I applied for where someone said, I don't even know why they're keeping the job posting open. You're the perfect candidate for that position. You worked for the company for 5 years. You knew the inside and outside of how they do business. Daniel, all I got from them was a thanks, but no thanks. Okay. So there's where resilience comes in. And how did I handle that situation? Well, I took that letter that they sent me, I went out onto my balcony and took a match to it. Okay. And just let it go up in smoke and say, that's the end of this opportunity. And I'm not going to continue to revisit it. So there's one way that you build resilience is not taking it personally. And one person said, the best way to define not taking it personally is if it wasn't you being treated that way, it would be the next person. So don't take it personally. And
Definitely.
yeah, and just recognize that there are so many reasons why people are not considered for a position. And you just have to say, the timing's not right. Now, I had one situation where I was interested and they said, we would love to hire you, but we don't have a job right now, a job opening. 2 weeks later, they called me and said, there's a job opening. Would you apply? So that's how that can work out. So resilience is just being willing to stick with it until something happens. And you
And
never
let it
quite know
go.
what that is.
Yes, and let it go, people. Probably this not for you. So go for it. There's something for you out there. So how can one manage feelings of shame or embarrassment associated with job loss?
Well, I think that first of all, if consider it to be I'm the only person who's ever lost a job. Okay, maybe there's some shame there. But when you think about in today's workplace, how many people who were employed successfully all of a sudden were given a pink slip, okay, for no apparent reason. Do you need to be embarrassed? I think, if you look at a job loss, it is a loss, Daniel. And you look at Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and her 5 stages of grief and loss, and talks about the first one being denial. Okay, that oh no, this can't be happening, or it's going to happen to other people. It won't happen to me. It can happen to you. The next one is anger, and that's one that I will often hear clients talk about is their anger, their betrayal in being let go from a job, whether they deserved it or not. And then there's the bargaining, which is, well, if I had done it this way, maybe I'd still have a job. Okay. Finally, there's that depression that we talked about with that workshop. That can be a big piece of it until you move into acceptance. And so if you look at it as a process, if you feel embarrassment, it's important for you to face that head on. Say, what am I embarrassed about? What is there here to be ashamed of? I did my job. I did my job well. Why would I be ashamed of that? For whatever reason, that job had a expiration date on it. And when it showed up, I no longer was employed there. So it was time to move on to something better.
Something better and big for you, people. So what are your some practical steps that the book suggests for navigating a job search?
Well, I think that one of the areas that many people fail to take advantage of is networking. It's important to build a network of people. And it doesn't have to start out with, I'm out of work, can you help me find a job? It's about networking making connections. You want to begin to connect with other people, because one of the areas that people typically can fall into when they're unemployed is isolation. They withdraw from being around other people. Maybe it is out of shame and embarrassment. That's not the time to withdraw. That's the time to get out there. Now, you may not want to do it with, 50 people, but if you could just do it with two or three to start with and say, hey, we're all in the same boat here. Why don't we just get together and talk about what's going on with us and some of the challenges that we have and what we're doing to address them? Now, I do have a workbook that accompanies this, and it's perfect for creating those scenarios with a small group or even a large group. So I think that networking is very, very big. Part of that is volunteering. Get out there, become visible in the community. And that is going to give you the exposure that you need for people to say, hey, this person would be great in this position. And I've heard that happening where someone says, you've got these great skill sets. I've observed them. Have you ever thought about? And I love it when it's the have you ever thought about, because that opens new doors to, motivating people, to getting them out there. And you have to really face what we call self-limiting beliefs. I don't know if you're familiar with these or not, Daniel, but these are the stories that we carry in our heads that keep us from moving forward in life. When you're over 50, no one will hire me. I'm too old. Yeah, my skill sets are too old. And so what you want to do is you want to look at each of those limiting beliefs and turn those around so that I'm too old for anyone to hire. No, I'm highly experienced and I can hit the ground running. The funny thing is with that, I'm too old. When I worked in one agency, I met with people of all ages and backgrounds. And of course, I would hear from the older workers, I'm too old. Guess what I would hear from the younger workers, the 20-year-olds? I don't have experience. No one will hire me. So it wasn't all slanted in one direction. Okay. The young people were struggling with their own self-limiting beliefs. With them, they needed to change it around to I bring innovative ideas to the workplace. Now, the same thing can be true of older workers. They can bring innovative ideas. But I think that there's something to be said about people who have had a number of jobs in their work history to where they know what it's like to start a job. They know what that sequence of experiences are so that they can say, oh, this is what it's like to get started. It's typically why, if you notice, when companies hire someone, they give you a 30-day period where you're, on probation. Well, because it takes about 30 days to begin to demonstrate the skill sets needed for that job. Now, if you're an older worker, that's probably accelerated because you've gone through it a number of times. So in the interview, you can say, well, what I know is I'm a very fast learner. And let me tell you about my experience with that. So that goes back to those accomplishments that you have. And what I would say to everyone, if they're interested in how all this works, start today by keeping track of all of the accomplishments you have at work. And the way you do that, you start out with, here's a problem I'm dealing with. Don't do anything more than that. Just start making a list of problems that you're dealing with in the workplace. Then the next step is, so what's the solution that I'm applying or I have applied? So you make a list of those next to the problem. Then as a result of applying the solution, what was the result? What was the outcome? So maybe as a result of something that you did, it increased revenues for the company by 25% over a 6-month period. So when you have those specifics, they speak highly of what you bring to a workplace. And again, Older workers are going to have more of those stories to tell.
Definitely, Dr. David. So, what will be your advice for those people out there looking for a job?
Well, first of all, be yourself. Don't try to be someone that you're not. When you go into an interview, I remember one career counselor who was very well known saying, when you go into an interview, you need to be whatever they're looking for. And I thought, oh, I don't know if I'd be willing to take that advice, because if I presented myself as someone totally unlike who I am, think about the amount of energy it would take to be someone I'm not. So I would say just be yourself and know yourself. Now, that goes back several thousand years. The more you know about yourself, the better equipped you will be to present that who you are to a potential employer. And that's really what a lot of the book, Out of Work, Not Out of Worth, is all about. It's, again, it's expressing your worth in a way that is self confident, that you have perseverance, there's acceptance in what's happened, you don't deny what occurred, and then that ability to bounce back, and then a commitment that even when things don't seem to be going quite right, you're going to just stick with it and be committed to the end result, which is being employed in the next best job for you.
Yes, know yourself, people first, and it will lead you to success. So, Dr. David, what is your short term and long term goals in writing?
Well, I think I was just talking to someone about this today. My goal is to get my message out to as many people as possible. As I was saying, Daniel, when I was doing the workshop, it was only, to maybe 20 people. But the book has the potential to reach millions and affect their lives in positive ways.
Definitely. Looking forward for more books, empowering books, Dr. David. And good luck for your goal and, of course, your coaching. So, to sum up our discussion, how can individuals identify and leverage their transferable skills during a career transition?
Well, I think that there are many, many uh, online ways that you can do that. So you just Google transferable skills, and there'll be many, many assessments that will allow you to identify what they are. Because someone might say, "Well, I was a teacher, so what are my transferable skills?" Well, training, influencing, many, many transferable skills there. Communication, planning, organization. So you take a look at all of those, Daniel, and you say, what other positions are out there where I might be able to use these skills, these talents? And that's where you can also talk to your network group about, oh, here are my transferable skills. Can you think of any places where I might be able to use these? People are great at brainstorming and coming up with, hey, have you thought about? We talked about that earlier.
Dr. David Petrove, thank you so much again for sharing your talents to the world. And can you please invite our listeners to support all your books?
Absolutely. And they can simply go on to Amazon and type in my name, and all of the books that I have published will show up.
Yes, people, let's support Dr. David Petrove because if you support him, more empowering books to come, and of course, more coaching to come. So, Dr. David, thank you for your time.
Thank you for inviting me, Daniel. Have a great evening.
More people. See you soon. I'm inviting you again next year, Doctor, so that we can talk about all your books.